A lot can happen in a week. Some of it good, some of it bad, some of it downright ugly. When faced with intriguing developments in the week's news, we turn to a rotating panel of non-experts to parse the good, the bad, and the ugly of it all. On today's panel, Natalie Arsenault, president of Arsenault International Consulting, and Mustafa Tameez, a media and public affairs consultant and the CEO of Outreach Strategists. Natalie, Mustafa, welcome to Houston Matters.
Howdy. Good to be back.
Panel, Food Not Bombs Houston, a collective that has been feeding homeless people near Houston's downtown library for years, filed a lawsuit Tuesday against the city of Houston. As Houston Public Media's Sarah Grunow reported this week, the lawsuit alleges the city is violating the organization's First Amendment rights by enforcing a long-standing anti-food sharing ordinance. Since March of last year, the city's issued the collective more than 90 citations, though at least 10 of them have been released since August. Food Not Bombs argues its food-sharing events are a form of protest and therefore protected speech. City leaders maintain there's only one location permitted for meal distribution, a police station outside of downtown. An organization running afoul of Houston's anti-food sharing ordinance is suing the city on First Amendment grounds. Is this good, bad, or ugly? Mustafa Tameez, start us off.
Ugly. You know, I remember when former Mayor Parker introduced the idea of this ordinance. And I remember a lot of the conversation around town was, if you feed people at a certain location once a week at a certain time, once people gather there, they just don't go away either, right? It becomes a gathering spot. And as it becomes a gathering spot, then it encourages that kind of behavior. And then I remember the time in the Mayor White's administration, earlier than that we had tried to deal with panhandling. And there's ordinance that were kind of put on the books about where you can stand if you're going to panhandle, like what part of the corner, and made it illegal for somebody to stand in the middle of a street to do it because you didn't want somebody to get hit by oncoming traffic, because that was happening, right? So in essence, for a long time, Houston has kind of struggled with, like, how do we take our philanthropy, the good that we want to do, and balance it with just public safety and just good governance. And both had done these type of things. Mayor White really led the effort on the panhandling side. We reduced panhandling under his administration. There was a lot of effort on that. And then in Parker administration, if you look back, if you look at it nationally, Houston has done a lot more for the homeless population. We get celebrated as a city that's done better than LA and other places, and a lot of it is because we've tried to mobilize, the community to focus on things that really make an impact on these systemic problems. Like we have, for a while, I think it still exists, that we had zero homelessness amongst veterans because we were taking federal vouchers, housing vouchers, combining it together, meeting like the federal money and the local philanthropy to find people homes. I say all of this because, when you say, well, what could be wrong by just feeding people? Like, why is it such a bad thing? Because all our faith tradition teach us to do that. But as a public policy, it does become very complicated when you feed somebody just one meal and then you just leave it alone and you walk away. And then the public infrastructure has to figure out what to do with all these people that keep showing up in a place. And the disturbance that creates, if somebody gets out of work and they're walking home and there's a bunch of people standing around that, ask you for money, right? And so that's the challenge. We have to balance our just instinctive goodwill to each other with public policy that's going to, protect and serve all of us. And I think that Mayor Parker really struggled with it, and I think she had done a very great job. Having said that, this is a very great legal argument, right? It's using what the people are doing, which was against the ordinance, to say that is our right to protest. So it's an interesting argument, right? Mm-hmm. But I really stand with, those that work very hard to pass this ordinance to make the city a better place, and really made tremendous strides, Parker especially, tremendous drive in dealing with the homeless population. And I think they should be credited for that. And I think this is an interesting legal argument, but I think the ordinance should stand.
All right. Good, bad, or ugly? Natalie Arsenault.
I am with Mustafa on this. I don't know if the ordinance should stand. To that point, I mean, I guess, it's a complicated situation. Like I've spent a lot of conversations with friends who are involved with homeless shelters, who are involved with feeding the homeless, food kitchens, all of that, and had conversations with them about, the homeless situation that we have in Houston. And there doesn't seem to be a really good solution. Like there's not like just an apparent solution. I know I was driving downtown maybe a year ago or so, and I was by the Houston Public Library, and I was shocked by how many homeless had gathered in front of the Central Library. And it just so happened that at the same time that I was coming down the street, there was a homeless woman who was walking around with very little clothes on and no shirt, no undergarments. So she was just bare. And obviously, one would conclude that the homeless situation isn't just a situation that's like, oh, it's just people who don't want to live by the rules and things like that. There's mental illness and all those things. But to be confronted with that constantly, when you feed people, to Mustafa's point, they have a tendency to gather because that's where I can come to get nourishment and sustenance and find community and things like that. But then you also have this dynamic that makes it unsafe. And then you have situations where, like what I saw, where there's just a random person who's in this group of other people who have literally no clothes on, and I'm driving down the street. So while I appreciate the work that is being done by Food Not Bombs, like it is a statement to be made that we have money to send everywhere else, but we can't focus on how we're going to solve this problem in our homeless population. Now, what came up for me, aside from whether this was just good, bad, or ugly on its face, is if they move from being considered a nonprofit to a political organization, what does that change their tax structure? Like if they win this argument, is the IRS now going to come and say, hey, so you're not a nonprofit, you weren't a nonprofit yesterday either, so now you owe us a different, right? So I just wonder if they could be spiting their face for their nose or nose for their face. But I think it's sad that it's bad and ugly that we're even in this situation, and that there's not really a clear solution, that it kind of makes everybody feel okay with what is happening and people's right to choose how they want to live their life. And if they want to live on the streets, then so be it. If they need mental help attention, then we should be able to get them that. If they're just in a temporary situation, we should be able to assist them with that. So there just doesn't seem to be a really good solution.
It's often said Harris County Jail is one of the largest, if not the largest, mental health institution, period, right? That's what a lot of the homeless and other population ends up in jail. You know what's the second largest place? It's our streets, right? I mean, the jails are big, but the streets are much larger. So these are systemic problems, and these are fun intellectual exercises in terms of how the law is used and the litigation and all that stuff. But the bigger issue is that we as a society, and we especially as a state, do a horrible job of creating a network in some way of catching the most vulnerable in our community, right? These things are far more expensive to fix and do for all of us if we spent a little bit money on the front end. For example, if we made sure everybody had health insurance, we would drive the cost of healthcare dramatically, because people would be walking into an emergency room, right, which is so much more expensive. Right. If we were to be able to house people, which would be a cost to us, but we would drive our prison costs substantially lower, right? So it's just, it's over and over again. It's almost like all of us, right, that if we eat right and exercise, we could be so much healthier and live longer, yet let me speak for me as an expert of me.
Me too.
I choose not to do it, right? We as a society do the exact same thing. We know the solutions to the big problems. We just don't build consensus to solve those problems on the front end.
As we discussed on Wednesday's Houston Matters, there's been a lot of chatter on social media and cable news in recent weeks over recording artist Taylor Swift's frequent appearances on camera at Kansas City Chiefs games this NFL season. It's only ramped up as the Chiefs have marched through the playoffs to the Super Bowl a week from Sunday. Ratings for Chiefs games have certainly increased as Swift has attended games supporting her boyfriend, perennial Pro Bowl tight end Travis Kelce. But among some football fans, it's led to grumbling that the TV broadcasts focus too much on her. It doesn't seem that way to me, but whatever. More recently, that grumbling has shifted into conspiracy territory as some pundits courting controversy have ascribed a nefarious political motivation to it all. That because Swift some years back made past left-leaning comments or endorsements of a couple Democratic candidates in her home state of Tennessee, it is somehow reasonable to conclude she is in some sort of sham relationship with Kelce that's designed to garner publicity surrounding an eventual endorsement of President Biden. Or something like that. I know this is an outlandish proposition, but maybe, just maybe, Swift and Kelce are simply dating, and any wild conspiracies are gaining oxygen because the Super Bowl is still 8 days away, and we need something to argue about. That's just a working theory, of course. But is it good, bad, or ugly? Natalie?
So it's good for the NFL. I mean, it's good for them. I don't necessarily see this particular conspiracy theory. I do see other possibilities around, the NFL leveraging the relationship or even putting the two together in an effort to bolster their viewership, which, it has done just that. Clearly, the Chiefs aren't hurting from it. I think Kelce's jersey, when they first started dating, went up like some 800% or something crazy like that with purchases. Because really, I mean, who knew Kelce before this?
Only football fans for years. Yeah, he's never done anything prior to this in the NFL. Okay.
Mahomes was very much at the forefront of the Chiefs conversation.
Yeah.
And now I feel like we have a more balanced scale, of franchise players now on the Chiefs roster. So I don't necessarily ascribe to this conspiracy theory. There are a lot of other ones we could probably talk about. The thing that's not a conspiracy, though, Kelce is going to have to go underground if they break up. The Swifties are going to be on him, and then Taylor Swift is going to make a whole album about the breakup and why he's trash.
Never date songwriters.
That's right. That's right, especially none that know how to play a guitar. I just hope that Kelce's brand can hold up under scrutiny should this relationship not last, which is a trend for Taylor Swift.
Okay. Good, bad, or ugly, Mustafa?
Ugly culture wars. He'll be Swift-boated out if he breaks up with Taylor Swift. I've been waiting to say that all week. I will say on record, I am a fan of Taylor Swift. I think she is a cultural icon. She's got 200 million plus followers on social media. There's fascination around all the types of things she does, and she really represents a lot of the aspirations and the struggles of a generation at times, right? I think that there's something to be said about that. And she drives people crazy that don't want to mobilize a young generation towards voting and civic participation in politics, right? I mean, she has moved people in tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, to register to vote. Oh my God, what an awful thing. You know what I mean? Like engaging young people in meaningful, substantive conversations so they would pay attention to their government, right? Oh my God, she's horrible. Let me give her a break. But there is, I think we're getting into that tendency where everything is becoming about politics. Everything's becoming about red or blue. Everything's becoming about, a conspiracy theory to move the country in the wrong direction, in some's mind, right? And I don't think that that's all that wise. But putting that aside, culture drives politics, right? Culture, shows us like the direction where we're headed. And that's why politics is always afraid of it, right? things move very quickly from a cultural context, and there are people that are drivers of that culture, like whether it's fashion, whether it's music, whether it's art, whether it's poetry, right? That part of our culture really moves society, and politicians and political people are always afraid of it because they can't figure it out. They can't, write a campaign script like a cultural icon can move it, right? So even in product placement, it's better to have the right person smoking your cigarette, right? Or drinking your soda pop than to just put an ad out there that's generic. So culture moves business, culture moves politics, and Taylor Swift, whether people like it or not, is a cultural icon that is driving a lot of conversation. So I like her. I think she's fabulous. And if you have trouble with that, don't watch.
I just want to know if the NFL is going to get into the dating industry where they start hooking up musicians and players, because that would be fun. And then maybe we'll get to vote on it.
The NFL dating app, I would be very, very weary about it because the NFL has had a lot of trouble when it comes to gender differences,
I know,
right?
I know. I just want to be one who votes. I just want to vote.
You're thinking reality show here, right?
Oh, look at you. Look at you, the entrepreneur.
Yes.
Who will you be giving the football to this week?
I will stay very silent because I know it's the family show.
Mustafa Tameez is a media and public affairs consultant and the CEO of Outreach Strategists. Natalie Arsenault is president of Arsenault International Consulting. Mustafa, Natalie, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.